We talk a lot about fixing what's broken in this job, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can do as a leader is just to see what's already going on right. Know Your Force is a simple system that sends a quick text survey to the people you interact with. It's helping leaders see the good their teams are already doing, back their people with real data, and step in before stress turns into burnout. Learn more at knowyourforce.com. Law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com. For a thorough conversation on how Tire Tag can help your agency and revenue collection, visit episode 204. That's 204. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Today we got a returning guest. Excited to get him in here because it's been just over a year. So I've got Commander Eric Tung returning. He's been a police officer for over 18 years now, because last year it was 17, so we did a little update.
Yeah.
You are
Sweet math.
Yeah. Still employed, still going. It's good. And he's in Washington State. He also develops leadership and wellness content on Blue Grit Wellness and Blue Grit Radio podcast, all of which bridge the space between community and police. And he's fostering personal and team growth. So welcome back.
Thanks so much, man. It's a pleasure to be back. So it's humbling to be asked back. So something went at least okay or not terribly dismal, right?
Hey, I'm a fan of your work, right? So obviously I'm happy to get you in here, and we chat off and on, and we've got a ton of mutual contacts now. So yeah, and we're going to be cross sharing this episode. So it'll air on your platform a little bit later. So it also saves us an extra week of work.
Right? Yeah, like work smarter and share the work. No, I love it, man. And yeah, the collaboration's been legit. I think that's one of the pros that a lot of us kind of focus on sometimes, with the pros of social media and the information age, or whatever you want to call it now, with podcasting and being able to connect across time zones, across state and national lines, because a lot of our struggles, challenges, and then opportunities are all very much the same, and we can cross-pollinate and breed these really, really good ideas. And that's really what I get excited about, is when I don't think so much about what you and I get out of this, but somebody somewhere or some buddies are going to listen to this, and they might have 20 years on, they might have 2 years on, they might not even be in policing yet, and they're going to hear some of these things and put them into practice in a new, totally fresh way that's going to really uplift our profession. And I think that's the only way we have to look at it. Like, you got to stay positive.
Yeah. Well, and as I was saying before we started the recording, it's about showing people, and this episode largely is about showing people just the many different hats or different roles that you can fulfill. You can wear a bunch of hats, and it's just, you can't just go in every day, just, hey, I'm just going to go and arrest people, respond to the 911 calls, and then go home. There's so much more out there. There's so much more you can do with your time and in your life. And man, it makes it so much more fulfilling. So, we're going to talk about some of the stuff that you're doing and that I'm doing. And I think from there, we'll be able to show a lot of people, just the options that are available to them. Because as tough as this job is, I find it does grant you a lot of leeway, a lot of space and time to get into some different things. So,
Mm-hmm.
And I was just saying to somebody on a conversation we had yesterday, I've become kind of like the human phone book. I'm connecting all these people, and it's like I'm not getting paid for any of this. I'm not getting anything out of it in the sense that like I'm not getting free stuff. I'm not getting money, but it's just really cool to see, somebody comes to me, especially now as a supervisor, and I guess you could speak to this.
Hmm.
They come to you and they're just seeking help with almost anything in their life. And you're like, hey, I got a person for you. I got a resource, a website, some education opportunities, whatever it might be. And I honestly find that's one of the most fulfilling parts of what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you're a connector, and I think that that's one of the best kind of roles that a supervisor or a quote unquote boss leader can have is not just having the answer. Oftentimes it's not. And the higher you go, my perception and my limited experience is that you don't have the answers. Oftentimes it's people close to the ground that have the answers. However, when you ascend in rank or role, a lot of times you have that big picture and you do get connected with more people. You're more
Mhm.
aware of different systems and resources. And so just like a new officer, like I think this is a common adage across every department, but that's basically like, hey, you don't have to know it all, but you need to know how to figure it out. You have to know who to ask or how to go about finding out. And it's even more so, I think, as a leader or supervisor. So, I mean, you're a connector, and I want to say that it was Mark Bouchard that connected us in the first place. He's an
Mhm.
absolute connector and just a facilitator of ideas and promoting growth, which is absolutely what we're all trying to do, which is really pretty badass.
And even before we go any further, I do want to give Mark a shout out. I was actually just texting with him the other day, so people got to check out his book, setting sights on stigma,
Hmm.
and he's also got his newer YouTube channel. It's Police Dash Mentors.
Yeah.
The guy is a wealth of knowledge, and he is doing some amazing, amazing things. So hopefully people can check him out. Yeah, as you said, he was one of the people who kind of connected us and his mutual friend. So I'll support that guy through and through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know what? Some of the stuff you were just talking about, actually, with the higher up that you go, and just kind of showing a little bit of humility. Do you find it's hard for people that you've come across maybe to actually say, I don't know? I feel like that is a difficulty that some people have, and they feel like they just got to give you an answer. But one of the biggest things I find with leadership is just people really like when you say, I don't know, and then you
Hmm.
find the answer together, or you at least point them in the right direction. I find they have more respect for that. They'll come back to you.
Yeah, I do think it's hard for a lot of people, and I think it's getting easier. I mean, with people listening to shows like ours and introspective resources like the Collective. Shout out to those gentlemen.
Hmm.
Like we were just talking about them before the recording, but I think as we recognize that it's not bad and it doesn't have to be scary. And I think that I've been pretty fascinated with learning more about human nature and psychology more recently in the last couple of years, and I think that just saying I don't know and being elevated to position of authority, it comes naturally because we're afraid, right? We're afraid to not have the answer. We're afraid to not be good enough. And so to get the systemic and technical elevation of like, hey, we're going to pay you more. We're going to put you in charge of more stuff and more people, more liability. A lot falls on your shoulders, and then you don't know. Like that's scary. Like you don't want to be that guy or gal. And so when we realize though that it's not so much that there absolutely has to be a level of competence to your job and subject nature, but beyond that, like your job is not always to know, it is to facilitate and to help those knowing and developing, right? So um I mean, I struggled with that early on for sure. Not so much at this level as a commander for me, which is essentially like our mid management, but as a new sergeant, for sure. Like I was a younger sergeant, which it probably doesn't sound young at the time. Like I had 10 years on, but these days, with our young industry, it's oftentimes younger folks. But
Hmm.
I for sure like had all these senior people looking to me, and I felt like I had to have not only the correct answer, but the best version of the correct answer. And it's ego, right? It comes from a good place for most people. And I think that's what a newer recognition for me is. And so how do we guide those people and guide those kind of authoritative egotistical bosses or managers. We're like, you gotta show them it's okay. And I think that, to your point, we do like when people say, I don't know. Like, it shows a depth, it shows humility, it shows introspectiveness. Like, I can think of a lot of bosses in my past that have paused and said, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Let's talk it through. Let's phone a friend, like that kind of thing. Like, it,
Yeah.
man, like, you're just human at that point.
Well, and they're working on it with you. I find that's
Hmm.
probably the biggest thing when I go to calls with some of the guys and girls out there, and I get there and they're always looking to you for an answer. Like, I don't know, let's just figure it out together. It's like, hey, here's my
Hmm.
experience. I might try these couple things, but every situation's different. So it might not work. You're going to have to innovate. You're going to have to create on the spot, on the fly. Actually, one of the things that I found is a big change lately, and I don't know where it comes from, but it's not so much people saying they don't know, but I just find them more willing to let people make choices. Like the bosses don't so
Hmm.
much have to control the whole scenario and tell everybody exactly where to drive, exactly where to stand or step or how to say things. They just go, "Hey, you're allowed to do these things up to this point. Articulate it to me. I give you the approval and you go and make it happen, however that looks."
Hmm.
So I think it's a lot of relinquishing control
Yeah.
is what maybe is the hard part for people.
Yeah, and it's super hard. I mean, we come into chaos in the job, like categorically policing a lot of times is coming into chaos. Sometimes it's violence, sometimes there's bad actors, sometimes it's just an accident, but things are really bad, right? And so we want to assert control to establish this peace, right? This harmony and this kind of restoration of the status quo, for lack of other words. But it is hard because a lot of times you're absolutely right. Like, it's hard to release. We are, a lot of us are more, I wouldn't say type A, but we're high drive, high performance individuals that gravitate towards this work, and we're high. We have a attentiveness to service, so we want to do our best. We want to make it matter, and it's really hard to step back and just say, hey, I gotta see what happens. So as a supervisor, it's giving your people all the tools, but knowing that you literally can't be out there all the time. And if you force yourself upon that and have the illusion of being there all the time, you're actually stunting their growth, which is, I think, what you're kind of getting at too,
Yeah.
which is, you know I think with looking big picture again, part of that's like our own quote unquote mortality, right? Whether it's memento mori,
Mm.
like stoicism, or not like not like we all will die one day, but we're gonna have to hang it up. Like, I have to retire. I'm gonna be moving to a different division at some point, and sometimes that's not up to me. So I got to set my people up the best way. Also, I take days off. Also, I supervise
Yeah.
people 24/7 that I'm not there 24/7, right? I supervise day shift to graveyard. I have to pick my hours through the week just to kind of get some face time and have it make it work. I can't be there all the time. So I got to set them up and trust them. And, with it doesn't mean trust blindly. It means, like, yeah, put people in the right position,
Yeah.
give them the resources and access and availability, and then let them ride, like, let them fly. But yeah, I think when we look at it in the context of, you're not going to be here forever, so what do you want your legacy to be? And it hopefully is not like asserting control and not trusting your people to do their job, because that's not what you intend, but that's how it comes off with micromanaging. And I've been there for sure in different aspects.
Yeah, certainly. Maybe you want to chat a little bit about some of the work that you're doing now, because this speaks to leadership, but also there's personal growth and then team growth. So that's kind of all wrapped up in what we're chatting about here. I mean, you got the wellness program, you're doing the radio, you have some of the courses for people looking at getting into policing.
Yeah.
Where do you find you're spending most of your time these days?
Most of my time is, well, I'll say in the last year, it's been really heavy on the podcast. And then the last
Mm.
couple months has been front loading a lot of that. We're recording in December now. And so a lot of that was trying to give myself a little bit of a buffer
Okay.
going into the holidays. So actually lately I've been less beholden to podcast scheduling and editing. It's been more reading and just trying to have that release, right? Because I know part of the conversation is to get into all the things that you can also dive into in your ancillary pursuits and passions in our policing careers. But with that, essentially, it's like another part-time job, right? And then
Yeah.
I had a lot of schedule and a lot of obligations every week. And so to give myself a buffer so that I can have more release and more flexibility and do the things I need to recuperate, it's trying to do not just as I say, but do as I, want to do, which is to get outside and make more flexible time to see people and connect with people I haven't in a while, especially with the end of the year. It's been pretty fantastic. But a lot of that has been reading and journaling and writing, and quickly it becomes ideas for another podcast or ideas
Yeah.
for a panel or an article. So I'm trying to keep some notes and then not let that take off, because if I bust out my laptop, then like 30-40 minutes later, I'm not doing the things I had originally intended to do because I want to jot down these ideas. But to answer your question, probably a little bit more, in the more recent like quarter or half year, it's been developing content and curriculum. And you mentioned a couple things like wellness. I've developed a wellness program, like a class training a couple of years ago. And as I've continued to integrate things that I'm learning in real time, I recognize that so much of it is actually leadership. Like a lot of it's
Mm.
mindset, and it's not about leadership for rank. It's about leadership of yourself so that you can lead others. And that's systems, that's teams at work, that's your own family, your own friendship groups, right? Your own community. But if you don't take time to actually focus in on what matters to you, what your value systems are, then how can you expect to build routines and model any sort of mentorship for others? Um, so it is very foundational in that course, Lead Yourself Well. It's like I'll say that the wellness part where I talk about sleep hygiene and eating habits and workout routines and suggestions for habit building, that's like probably 25% to 30%, if that.
Okay.
Everything else is really truly like mindset and developing your personal mission and philosophy, because without knowing where you're going or where you want to go, then how are you expecting to get there and building the strategy for that? So,
Yeah.
and if people haven't picked up, it's really an evolution, right? Everything I do, I try to see the void in what I didn't have or what I'm trying to continue to work on that is helping me serve in the way that I intend to, and then by default, I start thinking about how I can share that, and that's really what the podcast and writing and the training's all about.
Yeah, you sound you know what? The way you're describing that just there, that is exactly how I'm thinking about stuff. And some of our things like I'll do a bit on leadership or mental health and wellness, but I also have a component where I'm talking about, politics and current events.
Hmm.
And, you know, even in that space, I kind of read some stuff or I'll talk to some people that are super brilliant, they're really bright, and this is their life. They do these things. And I go, how can I get that to the rest of the people I work with or the public and want to put it out through the podcast? That's kind of the goal with all of this. And again, back to connecting individuals. It's, where can I find somebody, they got a passion for a certain topic. If it's gang work, drug work, if it's community safety and they want to focus on that, if it's leadership development, I can connect you in all these different ways with different people that are more the experts than I am. I can give you some advice or tell you how I kind of get through certain stuff. But as you're mentioning, it's even that personal evolution. It's a good way to describe it. Just as I'm going along, kind of doing all these different things, the show, working in the university, trying to work with young adults, the next generation of policy makers and politicians, and probably our future bosses or whatever job we're at. And it's like, how do we get in front of them and change their minds, make them see certain things that we want them to see or understand it better? So, I really like how you're describing all that. Do you get a lot of people? Because and I'll say I get this, but do you get a lot of people reaching out for a certain type of topic, or through a certain channel? Like which one seems to be the most popular for you?
Yeah, it's really shifted around, and I can't say anything too consistently. Like ever since,
Mm.
and a lot of it is like, if you build it, they'll come, and where you see the need, like serve the need. So a lot of that with hiring, with new people wanting to come in, like there just weren't tons of resources. Certainly when I started, and I believe when you started, pretty close. And
Yeah.
so when I was in recruiting, a huge portion of my content all became about recruiting and how to best test and how to recognize like your why and think about that stuff really really deeply. And so, because it was, my 40 to 60 hours a week working in that role, I started talking a lot about it. And then that continued when I promoted out of the unit. And so that's when I developed the hiring guide for those that want to just have a very developed, like organized process and how they develop their personal statement, their mission, and then how they interview best, right? And then what to expect at the different twists and turns. So that's continued on, even though it's been a couple of years. It's really not my main focus, but whenever someone reaches out with questions about X, Y, or Z, I try to make sure I'm incorporating X, Y, and Z. But your question also kind of brings up what seemed most popular, and some of the episodes that have tracked the highest are simply about leadership from kind of cross industry. It's one of them is a panel with a retired military leader as well as a retired police leader. Otherwise, like the field training officer episode panel is one of the highest performing because I think it
Wow.
grabs you at different stages, right? It's like people that are coming in want to know what to expect, and then people that are in the seat, whether they're field trainers or they're just trainers. And I think most seasoned officers have to recognize their mentors and trainers in one way or another. Like they're fielding questions and they're thinking about, the next evolution of developing their team. Like they're super intrigued by that. And I think it's also the panel. Like the panel was really diverse in thought and experience, but they all had a different take, and all of it was very constructive. Right, it was very positive focused. People from all different states kind of speaking on this same thing of training new officers and trying to be the best. And so it sounds like kind of I think there's a lot of similarity between both of us because we just want to put good, helpful, constructive information out, and then with that, opportunities to educate and connect, but also opportunities like just almost like capital O opportunities. Like you're working with a university now, and that's like the next generation. You're fostering education and awareness, which is like absolutely a personal mission of yours. I can see that, from
Mm.
here. So it's been very, very rewarding, and I'm sure you're experiencing the same. Just to be trying to do the kind of the humble work you see needing done, and then people reaching out or saying, "Hey, like, can you help with this, or can you be a part of that?" Which is very invitational. I think it's very rewarding when it's like, I don't know. I'm curious for you. Like, is that one of the best anecdotes that like quote unquote it's working?
Yeah, well, I was saying to somebody before, one of the hardest parts about this is the audience is largely law enforcement and, security intel types, at least on my
Hmm.
show. It seems to be the ones who reach out the most. So it's hard to gauge it because it's not a lot of them are scared to just click like on certain posts and
Hmm.
different things because they think they're going to get
Yeah.
in trouble. But the amount of messages I get behind the scenes, and then I'll just go to calls. I'll show up at a call on the street and I'll have people stop me and be like, "Hey, you run the podcast," or "Hey, you brought up this topic and like thanks for saying that," or "Thanks for bringing the chief on," or whoever it is. And that stuff's super rewarding. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
getting tens of thousands of listeners, and actually speaking to some of the stuff you were mentioning there, I can't make sense of, what goes viral or what people choose to pick up on.
Hmm.
I'll have episodes I put out that I'm like, man, this is the most thoughtful episode. We had great people on here. They're like crazy expert. They were super hard to get in because they're in demand,
Hmm.
and I could get like 200, 300 listens. And then I'll get somebody who's just not gonna say random guest, but definitely doesn't have the social media presence and doesn't have all these books and other things out there. I get them in, and all of a sudden it's like 1,000 people listen to it. Like I can't make sense of any of this stuff.
Yeah. It's hard. And yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but I know the message is getting out there. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel you, man. I'm like grinning and nodding because it's the times when I've tried to look at it more like performance based, like analytics, right? Whether you want to call it a business, which there's aspects of this that is a business for me, and then there's also just performance. Like anything I've been successful at, I've tried to analyze it and I've tried to get objective point of view, and so data is a piece of that, right? So then you're trying to figure out similarities and pattern recognition of like, okay, like it's not all about the likes or the shares or the listens, but that does say something. Like, it usually says it's resonating a certain way. However, you introduce a dynamic that is very true for law enforcement. I've seen it on my end where people don't want to like it, but they might send you a DM saying, "Man, like, you said something that like it hit in a certain way. Like, I haven't been able to put words to my feelings on this thing," or
Hmm.
something that I put out or something that we talked about on the podcast has been really helpful for their leadership development, or the promotional guide was really helpful for their promotion. So I'm not the best about like sharing that back out because it's not about that, or selling more or whatever.
Yeah.
But with the podcast, it has been tough because sometimes I have been like you, like I feel like I have this, I'm kind of trying to curate this panel and like these experts from different angles, and they're going to be very complimentary. And in the episode, usually I'm like, man, this was awesome. And then it's almost like, yeah, compared to any episode, it was kind of average, as far as performance, quote unquote. Um, but then it's sometimes just the organic conversation that you you just have a very real conversation with somebody, and you're right, they don't have a following. It's not about that. They don't have like a high rank, but people listen in such a way, and they're like, oh, this is like totally, it's almost like they're in the room with you, and or we were in the room with them, and it's speaking
Yeah.
just to the realness. And so I've been debating about that because I really enjoy the more the art aspect of it, and just putting it out as like a thing that people can use as they see fit. Because sometimes when you try harder, it doesn't pan out the way, it's like trying harder doesn't get more results for this thing. I think it goes, I think it works for a lot of other things. But in my experience, it's just trying to put it out and just see what's tracking.
I find that's the same with even just some of the social media posts. I can
Mhm.
spend 20 minutes drafting something that I'm like, man, this is a huge issue, and I feel passionate about it, and I'm gonna offer this opinion or may suggest to people, hey, you should probably go read this and look at this other aspect of it. And I do this big thing, put it out. And if it's on like LinkedIn, it tells you how many impressions you get. And I could get like 100 impressions on that. But then I'll just put out some article and put like one line with it. And next thing I know, I got 10,000 impressions. I'm like, what the
Right.
hell?
Yeah.
I put all this
Yeah.
work in for
And
nothing.
that's what's hard.
But you know what? I
Yeah.
appreciate the art aspect, like you're saying. Everything I do, I really want the thoughtfulness of it to come through.
Hmm.
That's why even social media and some of the stuff I put out, it's a lot of asking questions or slightly suggesting certain things. Uh, I really just want people to think for themselves. They don't have to agree with me. I've had a lot of people not agree with
Hmm.
me, but the big thing is like, hey, let's get people talking, and that's what in the comments section, which I know lots of people say not to read. I'll read them, but I'll go in there and on the ones that are actually thoughtful, or at least I think are on topic, I'll respond and try to get people like I'll say right in there like, "Hey, this is a good discussion point. You know, keep talking about it." Or, "Hey, I agree with this, and I think this is another way we could look at it." Or you bring up like a different aspect of it that I maybe couldn't do in my post because you get so many characters, or I don't
Hmm.
have time to explain every single scenario under the sun. But it's you really want to get the thoughtfulness of it. There's an art to it. Uh, you know, everything you're kind of saying, so it all comes through.
This episode is sponsored by Hero Schedule. If your department needs better scheduling software that isn't outdated, clunky, and expensive, Hero Schedule is an easy switch. It's $4 per user per month, and they give you a free 30-day trial. Get started at heroschedule.com and click on Try Hero Schedule. Law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com. For a thorough conversation on how Tire Tag can help your agency and revenue collection, visit episode 204. That's 204. Yeah, the LinkedIn impressions, and I absolutely track with what you're saying. And I think that, LinkedIn has been a much more constructive place for me, especially as of late, compared to like Instagram.
Mm.
I see my LinkedIn, like I'm posting kind of the same stuff, right? Like it's,
Yep.
a lot of times it is literally the same stuff. Uh, but LinkedIn is growing. pretty steadily, and then Instagram's falling. And if I was going to make, it's hard to not to get in your head on that. But if I was going to make an assertion over the last couple of years and when my Instagram was the highest and when it's, it's climbing back down, or I suppose it's steadily declining, is one of the themes I can see and feel is that there was a time in my career, especially as I was transitioning from sergeant to commander, or largely as a sergeant, where I was so frustrated about so many things, and Instagram became an outlet for that. Um, and I'm still frustrated about a lot of things because we have a lot of things we need to do. But I'm and people might see it. Maybe I don't see it as much, but I feel, and my intention is to point fingers less and try to focus on what we can do. And sometimes that is to recognize our own admitted victimhood, like as police officers, right? And so
Hmm.
we have all work to do. But it's like, hey, blaming the chief even more is not going to help things, or chief as like a rank,
Yeah.
and blaming the politicians more and making inflammatory post. And I don't think I've made inflammatory posts, but people have reacted pretty significantly, which is almost to say, as you talk about politics, like anything can and is politicized these days, even if the intent is not there. So
Yeah.
cops need to be cognizant and maybe even cautious of that. I'll use a couple C's there. But for me, it's like, okay, so what now what? Like I can't change who's in office. I can't change who, is in the department next door that morale's really low or whatever. Like all I can do, and what is way more significant to me if you step out, right? If you zoom out, like we were talking about earlier, is help develop the people that are going to be in those positions later. And that's what I really love about being and having interacted with the Curve, like the curve.org. It's essentially thought leadership, and it's a nonprofit like started by Simon Sinek and some chiefs following 2020. But it's like, okay, how do we have more dynamic and people focused, value focused leadership? And that's my paraphrase of what I see them doing, right? How do you help galvanize a team through messaging and more open mindedness in an industry that generally doesn't have those things?
Yeah.
Like you see it a lot more in the private sector. You don't see it a whole lot. There's a lot of reasons for that. And it's not to say policing's bad and our structures are bad, but it's like, how do we grow with the times and how do we be most effective is my filter through it. So that stuff sometimes isn't sexy, right? It's not sexy to say, hey, like let's just try to go in with a more open mind and try to have more open communication and build trust. And no, people are out for blood. They're pissed. Like it's
Yeah.
union versus admin, it's detectives versus patrol. Who has it worse? Who has it better? But I hope that through listening to content like ours, we can recognize as police officers or just, citizens or human beings, like that is just such a huge exhaustive use of energy that doesn't go anywhere. If anything, it actually is negative 'cause it makes you feel like crap. It makes the people around you feel like crap. Like we see it in our hallways, we see it in the roll call room. But like, we're going to have those moments. How do we minimize it
Hmm.
and focus our energy towards moving forward?
I think the big focus has to be on what you can control, right? It's
Yeah.
you want to give people that autonomy, and you want to give them that ability to control something. So, like you're saying, people want to complain about the chief, specifically the person or the rank, and that's something that's come up in my service. Yeah, I think that's every police service everywhere. It's the faceless person who sits like in the ivory tower or another building, and it's
Mhm.
easy. It's easy to just throw out the blame and the accusations. Now, I had a good relationship with our last chief and our current chief, and I've been in the room through the association when I was with the association as a director. I've been in the room for lots of these different conversations that have gotten people fired up, whatever the topic might be, whether it's politics outside or inside, it doesn't matter. um, and what I can bring to the table now, especially as a sergeant, being a person who has to be in a lot of these conversations or make decisions that not everybody's going to like. I can bring that perspective where I go, did you know A, B, and C had to happen for you to get this, or for this to happen? Like your problem, if you have a problem, actually lies with that middle part of this. It's not the guy at the end of the whole process. So there's a lot of different aspects of trying to educate, especially the younger officers, because it's like you got a 20, 30-year career ahead of you, man. You can't be jaded already. You're going to burn
Mhm.
out real fast and it's going to be real bad. But
Yeah.
here's the things that, you can control. And if it's not necessarily in your control, here's the things you can do to try to influence, right? We want people to have that ability to go out and speak to others, articulate themselves. And then again, back to the evolution and the growth. I started here. I had no influence. I had no decision making ability. I was just told what to do and where to go. And now you look at someone 10 years in, you're getting promoted, right? Like, what was the evolution? What got you to that point? And how do you pass that on to the next person? So, I will say on the social media side, if you want to get people fired up, because I've seen this on mine, just post a picture of Donald Trump. It doesn't matter what you say after that. I posted something
Yeah,
about
that's
him
good theory, yeah.
and just used it as an example, but had a whole different conversation. And all people could talk about in the comments was Donald Trump. And then even when I was like, well, he's not
Mm,
actually the central figure to like the point I'm making.
mm.
I'm talking about this other thing, but this article just happened to be a good example. And they're like, but you posted a picture of Donald Trump. So we're talking about, I was like, oh my God, let's think bigger. Let's not just focus. And again, that kind of speaks to how people get focused on the chief or somebody in management. It's like, stop just blaming this person. There's so many people in between, so many decisions that go on in between. Where can you be effective? Where do you have control? And then where can you influence or make some changes?
Yeah,
So,
that's huge. That's such a good theory on Trump, right? Yeah, I would venture to guess that if you posted his photo, any photo, like a good photo and a not good photo, of course, people are already like, there's no good photo or they're all good photos, right? Like that's kind of the point. Like if you just wrote the word good and you posted it, or the word bad, or the word okay, or neutral, I bet even okay and neutral would get a lot of like opinions and hate,
yeah.
like, oh, you're neutral on this guy, right? Like,
Yep.
and from both sides, which is like, how do we, and then it gets into conversations of polarization, tribalism. It's sometimes we can unite, upon a common enemy, but how do we unite upon the common maybe problem of our job, like public safety, of policing, of people that are out there actually doing harm to innocent people or persons? Like, how do we unite around that front? Because that is a tall order. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a lot of work to be done. Will never be done. We could all pull overtime for the next 3 months, and we may or may not make a significant dent. But that is the point. Like we have this pursuit, this purpose, this calling for a lot of us. So how do we not distract with the personalities and all the drama and all the BS? How do we just focus on what we can control? To your point, which is like why I love Stoicism. I know a lot of cops and first responders and military folks do, because like what you actually control is very little, but your influences can be significant, right? So even if you're the open-minded, kind of open-handed, um, communicative sarge that's like, hey, like sometimes I like to find the opportunities to explain the why and illustrate a little bit behind the scenes. I would encourage you and others listening that even if you feel like some people kind of shrug their shoulders and some people cross their arms and they're really standoffish, like it doesn't mean the point wasn't made, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to see the potential in the validity of that statement later, right? And so if we're all honest with ourselves, hopefully we can recognize a time that we heard something from a boss, earlier in our career, where we didn't get it, and or we actually vehemently disagreed. And I can think of several, just sitting here, where I felt so dejected as an officer talking to a sergeant, trying to explain like why we need to do what we are doing and why he was wrong essentially. But rank matters, and you take your ball and you go home, you don't do the thing. But then years later being like, man, he was right. um or as a sergeant frustrated with the one of the assistant chiefs, like running our division, like I was running a call and it actually became kind of a case study for a sergeant's meeting, how I ran it. But it was more of if I remember accurately, he didn't disparage me, he didn't call me out, but he's like, hey, there's a lot of cops here dealing with this one guy, like what if something happens on the other side of the city?
Yeah.
And because of the times and because of, I think, perception, a lot of the sergeants, and I was a junior sergeant, a lot of the sergeants around me like kind of rallied around me. They're like, that was BS. You did a great job. But after some of the emotions settled out a couple of years later, when I look at that from a different perspective as a more senior sergeant, I'm like, yeah, he was right. You know, the delivery maybe wasn't the best. It wasn't terrible. It was objective, but he's absolutely right. Like I was on one side of the city dealing with somebody with a, extreme mental health and drug conditions. He was committing crimes, like he was breaking stuff up, and it could have been a really bad deal. And this is around 2020, so you don't want to, you do want to try to de-escalate with more people and force options and negotiating options and stuff like that. But it was a ton of cops to deal with this one guy, and had something else come up in the moment. Sometimes we say, yeah, we could just break some people off, but we know how it goes. Like you're sucked in, you're on the scene. You're not really just pulling people off of a in progress situation. I think we totally could have done it with 2 to 4 fewer cops than what we had. We had almost the whole city, on that
Mhm.
detail. So I'll say he was right, and it's healthy and humbling to say you weren't the most correct, or you can see that position. But my hope is that even that example where you might be kind of just sharing a little bit later, people people need to hear it, and they might get it, and it might be a lot later. It might not be right then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where do you think you're having the most influence through right now? I think is a good place to kind of go with our conversation. Do you think it's through the
Yeah.
podcast side? Do you think when you're putting out the stuff for prospective recruits, helping them through the process, are you finding one is more rewarding in that respect?
Yeah, I think the podcast has been stable. The newsletter I do, it's a free newsletter. People can subscribe at bluegritwellness.com. Um, but that kind of summarizes some thoughts, and kind of there's a thought of the week. It's a little bit more introspective and reflective on something I learned, or maybe it's related to one of the podcast episodes. But because it's a newer thing, I think I'm seeing a different type of feedback. But
Okay.
as far as topic, or the type of feedback I'm getting that feels like the most influenced or the most rewarding is for I would categorize it as those kind of introspective, humble leaders that are putting themselves out there. They're trying to get promoted, or they are trying to do the things that we talk about, which is trying to be open minded, trying to focus on what they can control, trying to lead, even at a peer level, those around them to be a little bit more constructive, more positive, introducing some of that philosophy. When people when people reach out, send an email or message on how that's been really helpful, or how something really resonated, like I think that's the most rewarding. So I want to think, and I think that we kind of have to believe that even if the listens, or like the social media traction, and this is applicable to people that aren't on social media, because maybe you're just saying something at roll call, or you're
Yeah.
sending an email about wellness in the department. Even though you don't get that feedback specifically, you cannot ignore the feedback you do get, either directly or indirectly, and it matters. And I think it's almost like a potency of the influence, rather than like the sheer volume that you might see, because we're so like dopamine driven, especially this day and age with like the likes. But
Yeah.
um, it's almost like a DM to you, man, it should probably be worth like 1,000 likes, because that
Yeah.
takes actual investment.
Yeah, that's well, and we were saying that before. Like it's like, what's the quality of the feedback that I'm getting?
Hmm.
And this is something I've said actually in the last few months, few of the meetings I've been in, where I go, I would rather have 200 people listen, and those 200 people are actual game changers. They are in positions of influence or power, or they are looking to make a difference. They're the future leaders, right? Get students listening, rather than like 1,000 people who are just like it's just nothing to them, or just going to give you some little flippant kind of clicks on whatever social
Hmm.
media.
Hmm.
It's like, it's the same kind of concept. Like I'd rather go into battle with six really good people that I know are going to fight like hell and go right to the end, as opposed to like just 20 people, and they're like, they're kind of don't know what they're doing and stuff. It's like
Uh,
numbers aren't always the end all be all. What kind of quality are you getting out of this? I kind of gauge a lot of what I'm doing based again on the connections that I can make. And then when people come to me and go like, hey, who should I talk to? And I can put them in touch with someone that I'm like I know this person really cares.
Mm,
And if they don't have the answer, they're the type of person to say, I don't know, and
yeah.
will then put you in touch with the right people. But yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're saying. I was going to ask, do you get a lot of the people that come to you for advice or want to give you some of that feedback? Do you get a lot from inside your service? Because I don't. I think like
No,
99%
no.
of the people that I work with don't actually know that I even run a podcast because I don't talk about it too much at work. It comes up in
Hmm.
conversations or someone mentions it, and then someone else standing by is like, "Oh, you do that?"
Yeah.
But it's mostly outside.
No, I don't. I don't have much feedback outside of like closer friends, and I think a lot of my closest friends don't listen. Because they probably get enough of me in a different format.
Yeah,
Um, no, I get very little, but I think a lot of that might have to do with rank, and a lot of it might have to do with the type of content. I know there are some people that listen because there'll be evidence of it. They'll say something here or there, but no, there's a guy that I haven't been working with closely, but I started working with him in my division, and he made a comment that he's like, "Oh yeah," like he was kind of joking, like he's like, "Oh, you could always like bring up a podcast," and it showed that he thought that it's something I did like a long time ago, and that ship had sailed. And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm doing it like more than ever, and it's been pretty good." He's like, "Oh no, I had no idea." But if you're not on social media, or you don't listen to podcasts, and of course, and so
Mhm.
no, and I think that a little bit of it is, one of my mentors is like, it's like the dynamics of like a prophet in their own land. And I'm not trying to say I'm that at all, but I am saying that we're doing something a little bit uncommon and different. And so sometimes it does have way more traction outside of the area, the department, or even the region. Like I've had invitations to train like outside, more on the East Coast of our country, or our shared continent, right?
Yeah,
Than locally. And that's cool. Like I'm just trying to go where I see is helpful.
yeah,
The point is not to go on the road and do trainings. The point is not to do X, Y, or Z. It's really just to keep supporting these constructive conversations. As you said, like I want the potency of like people that are really, it's almost like niching down by default. Like the people that are taking this and they're actually mobilizing it to do something awesome with it, like maybe that I can't even perceive, or they're in a totally different role and team than I am. But something I say or share, because it's not like all my novel ideas, it's just how I'm processing and learning in real time a lot of times, is that they can take and do something awesome with it.
mhm,
It's just the same as essentially like thought leadership, like going back to plug the curve, like they're really trying to get the innovators and the early adopters, and then that's it. Like you're just trying to nudge a few people to get inspired, get motivated, get mobilized, and then they can hear that idea and then put it into like their culture, their systems in a way that makes sense for them, that is tangible and adaptable for them.
yeah. You know what? I think that brings us right to the end of the time we were saying we're going to do. I think those are good words to wrap on. And you know what? I hope this. I guess the purpose of the episode. I hope it really speaks to people and they go, you know, if I have an idea, at least go out and try it. And you're a good resource for this. I'm a resource for it. If people need help, kind of getting that going, at least even if it's just, hey, maybe try these things. We'll kind of brainstorm it together. But if they need connected with the right people, we're two resources that can certainly help out and get them in the right place that they need to get these things started. So, yeah, man, I really enjoyed the conversation. I thought it was really cool. And where should people go and follow you or find your work?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, man. It's been a blast. We could talk a long, long time. And if you're listening to this on my show, check out Nate Romas, the Quiet Professional podcast, and his content. But yeah, the easiest place for is probably to go to bluegritwellness.com, and then you can subscribe to the free newsletter, and that'll get your weekly podcast. But as mentioned, the podcast is Blue Grit Radio. Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. That's not as awesome, I think, as LinkedIn these days. Just the type of professional, constructive conversations.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. And yeah, people can follow along the Quiet Professional and Blue Grit Radio on all the podcast platforms. There's so many of them now.
Yeah.
But they're on all of them. So check them out. And the Quiet Professional on Instagram. I do a little bit on X, but just to occupy space. And again, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
yeah, just under Nathan Romas. So cool, man. Okay, appreciate having you on today, and we'll say bye offline.
Thanks so much. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.